All right. Everything's go, everything's green. And hello. Hello, everyone. Any listeners, readers, enjoyers. This is the first episode of Marvels of Audio. My name's Dalen. Friends kind to call me Day Day. Whatever is a preference. But, what this is about is going to mainly be an introduction, the marvels of audio. This is just my meanderings, wanderings, observations, and stream of consciousness on trends, the historical things I tend to see within comics, hence the Marvel, and music. Albums, EPs, singles, musicals, even. Big fan of that. But I want to preface this that I am not an expert on any of this. I'm not well studied. I don't have a degree. I didn't go to school for any of these. I'm just a normal, average dude who tends to consume all this comics, video games, music, all that on just a daily basis. Every day I'm waking up listening to music, and on my free times during lunch breaks of work or downtime or days off, I'm reading something, preferably of a picture variety. But what you can expect from this is essentially uh, every episode will just have a subject, a basic outline. I'll talk about an album, and I'll talk about a comic related to it. Sometimes movies and the scores and the audio of it, or just entire genres. Sometimes it'll lean towards one thing specifically, or the other. It'll be more about music sometimes, more about comics, or maybe a completely different thing. But we're here live at the Remix Audio Bar, 222 North Guadalupe Street. It's ran by Justin, and it has an incredible staff here. And I'm very grateful for him to be giving me this opportunity to use his equipment to start such a little podcast, essentially. I keep stuttering on the word podcast because I feel like I want to say radio show, but big fan of radio shows as well. Grew up listening to a lot of them. When I found out about podcasts, I was like, wow, this is just radio on demand. It was quite nice. But let's get some introductions out of the way. As I said, Dalen Newton. A few things you want to know about me. Let's start with music I listen to. Some of my favorite artists that I currently listen to, as of right now. Das Rocks. He's an alt rock artist. Started as an indie creator, was making music since he was 13. Quite an incredible guy. As of speaking, it's been 1 year since his first studio album with Sumerian Records came out, and they're on press to release another deluxe version of Dream Machine. Bug Hunter. It's an artist project ran by, who would have guessed, Bug. But he's also worked with a variety of artists. Another personal favorite of mine is Jesse Galloway. He's the bassist for the band. He's toured with him many times. Has his own music. Galloway. It's kind of a bit of a funky, fresh kind of rock and roll style of music. Jesse Galloway. Bug Hunter's a bit different though. It's tends to lean from acoustic to electric guitar to piano. It's plays with a lot of different instruments in all of his music and such. It's quite interesting. The variety just, you always get something new when you listen to one of his tracks. The best way I would describe it is like family-friendly lyrical pop. He can go from some really heavy-hitting, relatable stuff in some of his albums to just talking about just the most absurd and funniest of things. One of my favorite songs from him is actually Toddler with a Slingshot. And it's pretty self-explanatory about what it is. It's just him comparing his stumblings and wanderings to being a toddler with a slingshot, not knowing what he's going to do and what will happen. And a third artist I would like to bring up is the Narcissist Cookbook. Bit similar to Bug Hunter in the aspect that it's like spoken word, in a sense. There's a lot of just space he creates in his music and such. If you've ever, the best comparison I could make is slam poetry. If you ever gone to see some of that stuff live, but he's much more, how would I say, vulgar and visceral with his music, his lyrics, and stuff. It can garner from just talking about his personal experiences and just being vulnerable with the world to just making some of the silliest stuff I've ever listened to. But it's all based on personal experiences, or at least a majority of it. It's either from his actual interactions he's had with people in the world, or just the inner machinations of his mind. A good song to, how would I say, quote "Sugar in My Coffee." It's about his time in Nashville when he was on tour, and I actually saw him on tour in Denver. And he talked about that song specifically and that it was based on a true story, which I was quite surprised. Um, about a guy actually just named Coffee Mike. I believe it was Nashville, Texas. And he's very, very well known within his community, the Narcissist Cookbook, for absolutely hating coffee. Just doesn't like the flavors, not a big caffeine guy. He loves sugar, though. Eats tons of sweets. Hot chocolate, something he always orders. He's always talking about it on his Tumblr and such. But one day when he was, I think it was a day before he was supposed to get going onto the next venue, he orders a cup of hot chocolate, and some gentleman walks up to him and is like, "That's such a childish thing to order. Why would you get that? You're a grown man." And he just says, "I just don't like coffee. I prefer hot chocolate." The guy orders him like some really fancy cup of coffee, just doesn't like it, and calls him a child. And that's how he found out the guy was Coffee Mike. Like, literally had a tattoo of a steaming hot cup of Joe right on his neck. It's quite absurd when you think about it, but you know, everyone's got some of that. It's first thing that comes to their personality. What, and I guess for some people it's just coffee. I don't know. I have no right to speak on that. Anything I talk about or say is usually relating to Ghostface, hence the beanie. But I listen to just a lot of rock music in general, punk stuff. Uh, Tend to lead towards more of the heavier hardcore stuff, or like lighthearted acoustic things. As for what I like to read on my downtime, I'm very much of a, as I've said before, a comic guy. I gotta have pictures with my words, you know? It's the meeting of the two arts. And when I describe that as illustrating and writing, despite being, you could go all day about the vast differences of them and such, but it's quite impressive how they can merge so easily together. Taking a whole book, taking art forms on canvases, and able to combine them onto a page by page sequential form of art, whether you see it on the newspaper or just scrolling on your phone through social medias and such, or you're at Barnes and Nobles and you tend to just see a stack of papers with a soft cover on it, and it's something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And that's perfect, actually, because Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was one of the first things I consumed as a little kid. I started out with the TV shows, but to my surprise, when I entered in my high school years, it was, well, I say high school years, it was 8th grade, end of 8th grade, actually, when I found out that it was, they had a comic series. I don't remember the publisher I specifically read, but, it was just what you would expect from an average running issues of just like villain of the week kind of stuff and all that. However, one of my favorite iterations of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is The Last Ronin. If you're not familiar with that piece, I recently just picked it up actually, and I've just been absolutely enamored by it. Just to go over a brief synopsis of it, takes place in the future, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the Turtles are dead. All except for one, Michelangelo. And he's essentially on a suicide mission throughout the story to avenge his brothers and Master Splinter to take out the Shredder family. Now, Shredder is already passed. It's one of his sons or daughters that takes over and such. And it does have a little bit of backstory to flesh out. It's like what happened, how we got here, and all that. But the story is it's just a telling of revenge and just how unfulfilling it can be. And it's just how self-destructive, unfulfilling, and it's quite a nice story. It's a very quick read. Uh, Took me 2 hours to just sit down and just really absorb it. I'm probably honestly gonna read it again when I get home. But it's quite an impressive, how would I say, take on it. As of speaking about this series, they're actually planning on turning it into a full fledged. It was supposed to be a standalone, one shot, and all that, but they're fleshing it out into a series, essentially, where it's essentially supposed to follow the predecessors of, I guess you could say Michelangelo. I'm not. I could go into that, but then that just be spoiling it, and then there'd be no point of you reading it if I spoil such an amazing story for you. But that's of the graphic novel variety. If we were to stray from physical media, there's you for people that are more online and such. You probably come into a lot of webtoons, as I like to call them, web comics, webtoons. I like to say they're two different things. That's another can of worms for another day. But one of my first series I ever started reading was this superhero series, like these high schoolers with superpowers, called Unordinary. But nothing really unordinary about it. It's a series written by Uru-chan. I don't remember when it was publicized, but it's been about on a runtime since I would like to say 2019, right before the pandemic, and it's quite quite a successful on the webtoon platform specifically. They're fully published author as of speaking right now. They're in the works of, I believe it's the third season. They have 1.3 billion reads worldwide on the app alone. On the app alone, I don't know if there's other ways to consume it, whether it's be through Patreon or a personal website of the author themselves and the illustrator. I should preface this. She does all the work by themselves. Usually with like a lot of professional comics you see on like on shelves and stuff, there's a whole team behind that releasing that stuff monthly. There's people dedicated to line work. There's people dedicated to the inking process, then the flats, then the rendering and the shading. And that doesn't even go into like the people who work on the writing, dialogue, and all that. There's a whole team behind those stuffs. Well, with a lot of webtoon artists, this is solo. This is you do it by yourself. You're put on a weekly schedule. It's not like comics where it comes out every 30 days. This is every 7 days. You got to pump out 35 panels. So I can't stress enough how incredibly impressive it is to make such an incredible story and do this on a weekly basis. I don't even want to imagine how time consuming it is. But the story follows just a kid named John. John last name, don't know it. I just call him John Unordinary. But he's a transfer student, and what makes this unique actually is in this school meant for superpowered individuals, he is what people label him as a cripple. He doesn't have a superpower and such, and for that he gets bullied a lot. He gets beaten up, gets his stuff stolen, in and out of school even too as well. And you can already garner from just the first chapter, where all of this happens, is there's a hierarchy system. There's a power structure. We get introduced to some of the top dogs of the school. There's a king, there's a queen, there's a rook, there's a bishop, like all correlated chess pieces essentially. And these are like the most powerful people. The king, of course, is, you could think of it as like a class president, school president, but with a lot more power and say. And as I would say, a bit more forceful and physical with their actions. Uh, Something you could say along the lines of a tyrant. But these are essentially the most powerful individuals of the school. Whatever they say goes, and the whole school is based on the teachers just teach, and they just observe. They very rarely ever get involved with the students' lives, so it's kind of developing an ecosystem within this school. The story follows John and him trying to climb the ranks, essentially, whether he likes it or not. It's very much stated that he doesn't care. He just wants to resume his education, graduate, and get along just fine. However, that does not happen. Uh, Even if he goes out of his way to mind his own business. He just gets chased down. He gets beaten up. Just classic bully scenario. So the story follows him eventually, where he decides he's had enough of it and starts fighting back. And it can get a little creative. The combat and choreography is a bit surface level, but it's still interesting. You can see the movement, the impact of all the fights. He uses martial arts. It's not a martial arts comic. I should preface that. It's just basic combat and stuff. It's not going to go into super in depth with some stuff with like, oh, this is why he did this knee kick or whatever, and then it does a flashback to like the great back in the 800s. This ancient kung fu artist developed this technique. It's none of that. It's none of that. It's mainly focused. It's a drama essentially. It's a drama with action in it, of course, and there's a whole set of things I could go into, but highly recommend it. It's quite an impressive piece of work. I'm very impressed with it. Now, earlier I said we talk about specifically on the comic stuff, graphic, non-physical media, and sequential art. If you're not familiar with the term sequential art or an exact definition, that's totally okay. I have no idea what it still means. But essentially, if you ever read a newspaper, if you ever read Peanuts, Dilbert, Pearls Before Swines, or any of that stuff right before the crossword, square, gutter, square, gutter. And you just have the back to back to back pieces of the characters talking, doing something. You have that little invisible line that a lot of people call the gutter. A lot of people call that the gutter in comics. Or in the industry, you could say. That's essentially the divide of telling you something happens there, and now we're here at the present moment absorbing the information. That is sequential art. Why do I bring up sequential art? I bring up a third piece of media. I shared 3 artists, so I think it's only fair to follow the rules of 3. You should always follow the rules of 3. It's whether you're writing, creating, and all that, comedy, dramas, plays, rules of 3 will never fail you. Trust me. Trust me. But there's another series called The Blue Chair. The Blue Chair is, how would I say it? I literally can't describe it other than it's just a comedy. It's just about this man named Shen, sits on a blue chair, and he just sits down in comic format, one picture after the next, and talks to his audience. Whether it's like a little running joke or just something a bit below the surface of the pond, going a little bit deeper. But it's pretty interesting stuff. I would describe it more as like comedy commentary and such. I also follow the gentleman Shen. That's his username on a lot of things, and that's just the name of the character. I guess you could call it a OC, original character, in a sense. But it follows this gentleman sitting on the blue chair interacting with the different characters of the Blue Chair world. I guess you could call it Blue Chair verse and such. Woo, sorry. Got something, a little bit something in my throat. Ooh. All right, we're good. But Blue Chair is, as far as I know, it's been running for about half a decade. Now, nowadays, it used to be on I wouldn't say daily, probably bi-weekly would be better, as in like twice every week, as they would only consist of like 6-7 panels, really low effort, no need to commit to it, kind of form of art and creative and storytelling and such, which makes sense, but this is mainly just the authors. Here's a funny joke I thought of. Here's something I was just thinking about, and I just want to put it down and let people see about it. He works on several series. He's worked on many series and lots of projects. He makes his own board games. He does a lot of art for, as far as I know. He works with small businesses and stuff like that to make art and stuff like that. If you're familiar with the comic artist Beetle Moses, it's kind of the same deal as that. Gentleman makes his own comic strips and such, but he's made art for official posters for the NFL football games and stuff like that. He's also a co-writer in a lot of series. One of his series that I've read is Live with Yourself. It's about this gentleman that works at a little. It's literally called the time machine factory, and he's a bit of a slacker. Doesn't really care about his job. Just kind of just leaves stuff around. One day he kind of gets just messes up his usual closing routine, and a little time accident happens. And there are four things that are displayed within that series. There's present him, there's tomorrow him, there's oldie, and there's youngie, which is him in his 80s, and little infant toddler him. It's a very not serious series at all. It is purely just comic relief. Kind of the same thing I was talking earlier. It's like it's a villain of the week, joke of the week, stuff like that. But it's a very cute story, and that's another form of media to talk about another day. But yeah, those are some of my favorite currently artists, creators, illustrators, creatives, and all that. But what about outside of that? What about outside of just music and comics? Is that your entire personality? No. People are much deeper than that. That's why we have these art forms in the first place, for creating music, for creating comics, media, movies, games, sounds, scores. It's a way to, flesh out a bit more, cuz, I myself struggle to just, get my words out there, talk. Sometimes people just need a platform or another alternative for getting that stuff out, all those thoughts and such. It can be a little difficult, such as a podcast is one of them. But outside of that, I am an amateur writer. I do poetry and such. As of right now, I'm currently working with a small team to just publish a poetry book. Always been a fan of poetry. If you know me, Dalen, in the area, you can usually see me at many, many different open mics. I help bartend for one of them, actually, myself. And as for slam poetry, gone to a few. More like, community-based ones, not like official, organized spoken word events and such. Though it's mainly just an environment thing. Where I live here in New Mexico, it's kind of hard to find that. Kind of hard to find that space, that underground scene and such. Another thing outside of that is, like, if you couldn't tell, I'm a big movie guy. My favorite genre is thriller, not to be confused with horror. That's different. On the subject of thriller and horror, I think the biggest tool that's used to separate the two is audio. Mainly being whether it's visual interpretation or an auditorial interpretation. If you're familiar with the term score, for those who are not, a very loose definition of it is basically the sounds you hear that are not of a musical variety in movies and such. It is audio that is specifically meant to enhance what you are seeing. It's the culmination of two senses coming together to enhance the consumption of it, essentially. It's kind of the same aspect with comics, in a sense. You take in two art forms of writing and drawing, creating, and making one thing through it. But what I say defines thriller is more leverage with how suspense is taken and approached at. When I think of thriller, I think of something more along the lines of realistic, and it's, how to say it, the gotcha moments, whether you call it jump scares or what gets your heart racing, adrenaline running through you, is long, drag out scenes done through score. Makes you expect something, gets you prepared for something, essentially. Horror, I feel like, is a much more visceral, upfront, in your face. With a thriller, I think it's more focused on the score, or at least that's with a lot of movies I watch. With movies that label themselves specifically as horror, it's more, instantaneous receiving, with jump scares and stuff like that. I think a good movie to reference would be It, the remaster from the Stephen King It. Not talking about the original, the new one, part one specifically. But there's a lot of just jumping out of the corner in your face, just grotesque horror, this evil, terrifying demon that takes the shape of a clown or your greatest fears, essentially. It just jumps at you. There is a score. It is elevated by, of course, the audio of it, the soundtrack, you could say as well. But the main focus, what's gonna get you jumping or sitting at the edge of your seat, like keeping you at the theater until the credits roll, is when's the next gotcha, essentially. As for Thriller, I feel like it can be more dragged out sometimes. It's a slow burn to get to that big pop. Like it's coming, it's gonna happen. You just don't exactly know when or where it could be. And there are a lot of movies kind of play with this. A good example I would say would be the new Scream movies, 5 and 6. I'm a big fan of 6. I have my gripes with 5, though. I like the approach it takes. It's got a lot of moments, especially in 5. There's this one scene where the kid's taking a shower. About 2 murders had already happened in the neighborhood. Kid's taking a shower, gets dressed, and he's, alone in the house. Door he left unlocked. What an idiot. There's this scene where it's from the shower to getting dressed. The noise just gets slowly higher tempo, more bass, louder, until you don't even realize it, but it's overwhelming what you see on the screen, essentially. When it's just your average everyday, just like, oh, I just got home, time to relax a little bit. He opens the fridge. The camera's pointing at him. You can see inside the fridge, nothing behind the door. And audio just picks up like crazy. And everyone just sitting in the theaters just thinking, like, he's going to close the door. Ghostface is going to be right there. Nope. Not at all. But surprise, surprise, he does appear later in the scene. But I feel like that's a good example of what I was describing with exaggerating, dragging it out, and, setting up. I think the Scream franchise puts that to great effect and such. But yeah, horror and thriller. Sorry, had to make that distinction there. Some people just tend to throw it all together like a catch-all term. Similar with genres of music and such. People will be like, oh, they'll listen to something metal or punk or emo, gothic, whatever. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's alt rock. And I'm like, no, that's not alt rock. We have these different genres to label, And, not to say sometimes labels aren't necessary, Sometimes it's its own sound. Sometimes it's its own unique interpretation. I believe that that's the same thing with, I would say, a good 90% of artists, or at the very least, every indie artist or solo project artist and such. It's the same thing with comics, There's if you've ever heard the one saying of any original thought you've ever had has been thought of before. I think that's quite a dumb interpretation. I think we're way past the era of, trying to focus on originality, Basically everything's been said and done, and everything that hasn't been achieved yet has been speculated, And it's just a matter of time before we get there. That's the whole point of sci-fi, in a sense, if you really want to tack it on there. But I think nowadays it's more about, the best way to stand out, putting it in a cheesy way, is putting some heart into it, Making a piece that stands out from the crowd, And in a crowd of people who probably wear black hats, you could be the one person that wears an orange hat. I feel like that's the main goal when achieving a piece of any form of, like, of the spectrum of creatives, With writing, specifically. When you're writing a book, I notice this with a lot of stuff I read. I never ever see people trying to, like, divert from the, cliches or whatever, but just had like a little twist here and there, but they're trying to make their story unique, as in, like, it's just this one scenario. And this is kind of a bit of a paradoxical thing I'm talking about now, because I just said I don't think originality is something we're achieving, but why do I say we're, with a lot of stuff I read, there's that little twist there. There's that little, trying to differentiate itself. I don't think it's bad to work off the back of things that have been present for like centuries, you know? It's the same concept as 12 Bar Blues. There's stories like Pride and Prejudice and such like that, a tried and true love story and such. If you want to compare every love story or rom-com or whatever, drama, it's the same thing as 12 Bar Blues, where if you just go back far enough, keep going down year by year, month by month, day by day, you're eventually just going to get to a point where it's just like every song or book is just a ripoff of this one that came out many, many centuries ago. So, or do we get to the point where we differentiate ourselves from it, you know? I feel like character is a big thing, you know? Because just like, you know, the world, you wake up, you don't know what's going to happen. When you open a book, you could see that it says romantic drama. And it's like, okay, there's going to be a love affair. It's going to be people in love, you know, very straightforward. Drama, there's probably going to be some, you know, stuff that happens. It's like, oh, I can't believe you fell in love with her. I already loved her. I told you that before. Kind of stuff like that. But I feel like it's the approach, it's the dialogue, it's the climax, and how these can all come together. There's so many elements that can make it a piece feel original, even though you could read it and still be like, yeah, but like I read this and I can compare it to this book and that book I've read before, but it's not quite the same. I get that I'm speaking in very vague terms here right now, but I hope you understand what I'm saying with it doesn't need to be original. I think all it needs is character and heart. And it's mainly just a reflection of what you're creating. It's your twist on it. And I think that, in a sense, ironically, makes what people create original. It could be said for the same thing with music. I fall into that same thing all the time. When I, like, someone will show me a song or whatever, like recently, actually. Sorry, something in my throat. That's like the third time. There's this one band I've been listening to recently called well, I say band. It's not a band. It's a single artist. She goes by the name Sophia Powers. Woo! Sorry. Appreciate you, Justin. Good old Justin, always saving my life. Always got my back. But as I was saying, Sophia Powers, she's an independent artist. Uh, she makes hyperpop specifically, but she tends to experiment with a lot of different genres within her tracks, producing, singing, and stuff like that. I think it was the single "Better on You," which takes a lot of punk influences with like specifically within the chorus. It's definitely a lot of heavier stuff than she's made before. I was making it. While making it, it started out as a joke. That's a whole nother thing to talk about. But just from backlash from like, you know, a lot of new people coming in to listen to her music and a bunch of haters, it was just like, I don't care what you kind of say kind of music. Showed it to a friend recently. Absolutely loved it. But he said it reminded him of this band called Baby Metal. I've only listened to a few of their stuff. If I'm correct, it's a Japanese band, and it's very the you know, they dress up in like the cute dresses, the whole like kawaii stuff, maids, magical girl esque, but the singing and stuff is you just have these really cute like chicks. I'm pretty sure they're in their 30s. I could be absolutely wrong, but they hit some low notes. I'm talking like guttural, like something you could only get by enveloping your entire mouth on the mic. I'm not going to do a visual representation of that. That's quite disgusting. But I hope you can get that image in your head. It's like it's pretty impressive the range they have and such. And it's kind of like a thematic band in a sense, which is like you just wouldn't expect that. You know? It's just how would I say it? It's pretty interesting, you know. Can't say much on them. Like I said, I've only listened to one song, but I'll definitely be listening to more of them. Uh, so yeah, this is the introduction episode. This is Marvels of Audio. I usually want to try to shoot for, I would say, 30, 40 ish minutes. This is just essentially just me rambling about what happened this week or a general thought I had. Of course, I do want to keep a thematic idea with each episode, a subject, and all that. But I do want to have like a little theme going on, where at the end of every episode, I'll recommend something to read or watch, or listen to. And I think the first thing I could recommend, I actually have the album here pulled up. Uh, with the idea of introductions and such, getting to know each other a little bit, I don't think there's any better album to recommend is than Bug Hunter's first studio album. This is his third album, but this is his first studio album. It's called Bigger Than Myself, released 2020, prime time of the COVID pandemic. That's actually where the Toddler with a Slingshot song is originally from, believe it or not. But I feel like that will give a good insight to what Bug Hunter is as an artist, as a person as well, even. And you can kind of get a general idea of some of the music I like to listen to. And then, with that in a sense, to anyone who's listening or watching, thank you for spending your time absorbing all this. I really do appreciate it. And of course, once again, I would like to thank the Remix Audio Bar, 222 North Guadalupe Street, coffee shop. They sell a variety of drinks. They sell food as well. The ramen bowl, really delicious. Absolutely love it with the pork. But yeah, and I hope to catch y'all next week. That's a wrap.